welcome back to the Build Bully podcast. Excited today to have Donte Bryson here of Bri Lamar. Phenomenal background, very, very cool story that I'm excited for everybody to learn more about. But Donte, first, just give us a little bit about what Bri Lamar is, what you're working on, and then we can get into all the fun.
Absolutely. Bri Lamar is my namesake fashion label that I got started back in 2021 while I was in the military. I started it out of my 120 square foot barracks room, and I've just been building ever since. I've designed a little bit of everything from outerwear to sweatpants and snapbacks. And recently in 2025, I released my first handbag. So that's our focus. We're focused on handbags, and we're going to stick with that until the audience wants some more.
Sure. Awesome. Well, that's obviously the lead is now here. This started in your barracks. I mean, that's just so incredible. Like I would love to hear, obviously, has this been a passion for a long time, and how difficult is it to, obviously, a lot of people have two jobs and a side hustle. This is very different. This is, full deployment, working on this and having this as kind of the next step in your chapter. Is that something you always envision? Has this been a passion of yours forever, or how did you kind of get into this space?
Yeah, definitely not. I really had no idea what I wanted to do long term. So that's the reason I joined the military, to give myself some time to figure out what my passion was, my gift was. And it was my dad, actually, in 2020. I was doing graphic design because I've always been skilled creatively. I just didn't know where to put the energy to full time. And so I was doing graphic design at the time. And my dad, we were on the phone one time, and I was telling him, like, oh, I want a graphic design studio. When I do all these different things, because I'm a visionary. So I'm just dreaming big. And he's like, I think you should do something in fashion. And at the time, I didn't really get it. But later on that year, he unexpectedly passed away. And so in 2021, it was just on my heart real heavy. And I was like, you know what? Maybe he was on to something. Let me take a swing at this fashion thing and see what comes from it. And I designed my first collection on Christmas Eve of 2020. Well, released my first collection on Christmas Eve of 2021. And I just was like, you know what? I kind of like this. And it just grew into something that I did not imagine, but I love it.
One of those, parents are always right. You hate when that happens,
Yeah.
but I mean, to have that vote of confidence,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm sure, I've lost my father, and that, gives you a newfound purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like potentially the accelerant to get you where you are today.
Absolutely. I actually named the brand after the both of us. I'm a junior, so I took our last name, Bryson, and I put it with our middle name, Lamar. So that's where
Wow.
Bri Lamar comes from.
That's awesome. I mean, you have to go visit the site. You have to get these bags now. I mean, that's an awesome story.
Yes.
And, kind of to talk about those roots. So you're thinking about graphic design while you're in the military. And during that time are doing graphic design just for fun on the side. Like, how's that start to kind of come together while you're still, in truly a all encompassing role, and doing this, kind of as a side project? How did that start to evolve for you?
So actually around like 2018, 2019, I had a friend that she had a skincare brand. And so she would always ask me to make flyers because I just naturally knew how to do that. I don't really know where that came from, that skill, but I made flyers on an app that I had on my phone. And it went from her getting her flyers from me to someone else asking. And then it just started to become a consistent thing of people asking me to do different graphics for them. And then I had another friend tell me, like, you're doing graphic design. And I'm like, graphic design? I'm just making flyers. And so I looked it up and I was like, wait a minute, I am doing graphic design. And that's kind of where that came from, of me just naturally getting word of mouth marketing, people recommending other people to me to design graphics for them. And I just started having a graphic design side hustle while still serving active duty in the Navy.
Wow. And were you deployed on a ship doing some of this? Were you at a base? Like, how, because obviously that has its own whole set of challenges to get a side hustle going.
Yeah. I was yes, I was on a ship in San Diego. So sometimes that would be the tough thing about, like, when we had to go on our underways, like going out to sea, I would have to put on pause, the graphic design. But that's another reason why I just took my time with it. I wasn't really trying to make it a big thing at that time because I knew I had so much on my plate. So I just did it when I could. So anytime I was in port, I was just taking more clients. I just did the best I could with what I had.
That's incredible. And so as that kind of starts to build, um, obviously you have your time of service. And was this towards the end of that, or was this throughout your service and it kind of came to a full on head once it was, time to leave the service?
So yeah, it was actually towards my last 2 years. So I did 4 years. And so my last 2 years is when, or towards the end of my second year, I think I started, yeah, because yeah, so it was like the ending of my contract where I started to tap into graphic design and then eventually fashion design.
That's fantastic. And I will ask a similar question later,
Mhm.
but I think there's very clearly two aspects of your journey that are really impressive for anyone that's kind of thinking about this, whether it be someone that is currently active and looking for their next, life step once they're out of the military. And then there's obviously the whole business of I'm not in fashion and now I have to figure all that out.
Mhm.
So if we stay on the in the military, thinking about that next step, what are some of the things that you would, give advice to active duty military today in terms of starting to think about, their goals, the passions, the next chapter? Because I know that it can be such a challenge for a lot of vets when they come out of finding their footing and finding that next step and finding something they can have as much passion about, because obviously it's such a all encompassing role when you're in it, and then all of a sudden it's gone. What kind of advice would you give to folks in terms of thinking about that, preparing for that, and
Mhm.
maybe some of the emotional pieces that you went through as you made that transition?
I would honestly say, I hate to sound cliche, but you have to follow your gut. If your gut is telling you that that chapter is coming to an end, regardless of how hard and challenging it is, because it's very challenging transferring from being in active duty to being a civilian again, even if you're not starting a business, is challenging. So, but you just have to follow your gut. Because if I would have never followed my gut and I would have allowed my fear to take over, I would have still been in there and I wouldn't been living a life that I'm starting to actually feel fulfilled. Um, so I would just say go with your gut, not with your emotions so much, because your emotions can confuse you a little bit in the beginning. And over time, things start to build and you start to see and become it starts to become more clear that you made the right decision. But it does take time. It's extremely challenging. You need to lean on your support system as much as you can. If that's friends, family, team, whatever that is for you at that time, I would just say lean on them as much as you need to. Vent when you need to, because there's going to be some times where it's very frustrating. So just vent when you need to get it out. Write things down. I would say that was like the game changer for me is when I started writing down my plans. And anytime I would get my vision would get a little bit blurry, I could go back to what I wrote down and get back focused.
That's great. And I think, the really interesting thing, and I'd love your perspective on this, is there are so many tools that I believe service members come out with, and the challenge I think is for somebody that's in your shoes that's shifting from entrepreneur or to entrepreneur, I should say, the work ethic, the discipline, the focus, all of those things, are probably just rooted in you now,
Yeah.
all day long. But that entrepreneurial on your own, making that decision, having every decision that is yours versus obviously in a lot of cases following orders.
Mhm.
What was the hardest transition for you in terms of kind of overcoming maybe some of that doubt that was there from there's not somebody telling me what to do anymore,
Yeah.
and now I've got to take this on. How did you kind of build that muscle while still allowing it to complement those traits? Because I think that's a challenge for a lot of folks.
Yeah. I was repeat again, like the having my plans written down, because a lot of times I did not know what I was doing. I
Sure.
just was trying my best to move to the next level in the business. So I would just write things down the best way I knew how, watching a lot of podcasts and listen to a lot of audiobooks, reading a lot of books, just trying to learn from others in my industry the best way I knew how, and just applying what applied to my business and then just figuring it out from there. A lot of things don't work, but you won't know until you figure it, until you try it and you realize, maybe I need to pivot and go another direction. So I experienced that a lot throughout my journey, just bumping my head and figuring out what worked versus what didn't, and just having my own blueprint instead of trying to like mimic others, get inspired by others, but just not mimicking what other people had done. I think me being in the military and having, to go from being told what to do, it just automatically gave me more discipline because I kind of treated I would say like my business as if I was in the military. Like I wouldn't give myself an excuse for not showing up because it's like if I'm in the military, it's no calling off work. It's no you give an excuse on why you can't get a task done. Your commander or your chief or whoever is going to expect you to get it done. So I kind of looked at my business in that way, and I think that helped me, especially in the beginning. Just remaining disciplined because when you making your own decisions, sometimes we want to be like, oh, I can take off today,
Yeah.
but I looked at it differently, so I didn't give myself that leeway.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, you're now the captain of your own ship, right? And it's how do I drive with that same level of commitment and effort on my own goals, and I love that perspective of kind of turning it on its head and saying none of this changes. It's just a different goal and a different self-inflicted order, which
Yeah.
can some days be great and I'm sure some days be challenging.
Mhm.
But that's a wonderful way to look at it. And so tell me a little bit about that timeline. So you were doing the graphic design.
Mhm.
Had you started the fashion before you left the service, or was that kind of in tandem on the timing of how the business has evolved?
Yeah, so I had a year left when I started. So I started in 2021. I got out in 2022. So I had just a little under a year with me doing both. So I started graphic design in 2020, it was like the end of 2019, more of 2020 though. That's when I really got serious with it. But 2021 is when I decided that I was going to do fashion. But I had that last year, so I had to do both, and it was challenging, but I just did what I could.
That's wonderful. And so when you started, I think you said snapbacks. Was that the first, or
So my first was actually t-shirts. I had 3
Nice.
t-shirts. They were the same design, just 3 different colorways. And I released them on Christmas Eve. Yeah.
That's great. And so how did that evolution, this is your design, got it, feel confident on design.
Mhm.
Now we're getting into how much product do I order? Where do I order the product? Is
Mhm.
it the quality that I want? How do I think about margins? What was that, initial run for you like? And what were some of the lessons or lumps, as you mentioned before, that came out of that?
It was definitely a headache. I started off with the t-shirts, and I just like a challenge. I like challenging myself, and I just was like, you know what? Let me try a hat because I didn't want to put myself in a box. So anytime I would think of another design in another category in clothing, I would just try it. And if it turned out to be something that I actually was like, oh, I would wear this, I would just put it out and see how everybody else would receive it. And once I started getting different feedback on like because people will ask you, can we get this color? Can we get this color? That's kind of how I started to gauge that of like how many different colors should I release and how many different should I order in each quality or each size. And then I would do pre-orders. That also helped a lot. I still do pre-orders because that also helps me gauge on inventory and stuff. The logistics side of the business is a whole beast of its own, and I'm still figuring that out to this day. I do not have all that figured out. I'm
Yeah.
just doing the best I can.
Yeah.
But I use the data from my customers a lot, like just putting it out on the internet, seeing how they receive it, seeing the responses in the DM, in the comments, and then going from there, just trying to put it out and putting out a little bit, just not putting all of my eggs in one basket. And then I'll see it from there, and I'll just gauge on how to move the next time.
That's great. And so as you kind of have progressed, obviously there's lessons and I definitely want to touch on the fulfillment and logistics side because I know a lot of people look at this space like, oh, it's gotta be easy. Everybody's doing it and farther from the truth.
Yeah.
Um, but as you kind of, were testing these things, obviously now the signature item is the bags, and how did you ultimately get there? And that's a whole different level, a t-shirt design, like, all right,
Mhm.
I know people have t-shirts, right? Like I can order a t-shirt, I can get it printed, I can figure that piece out. Hats, there's inventory out there. For you,
Mhm.
your bag design is unique. It's, not a off the shelf by any stretch. And so
Thank
how
you.
did you get there and how did you kind of navigate that path to decide that's where you want to lean in?
Yeah, so over the but, like, so a lot of my customers were women, and so
Okay.
they will always consistently ask me, "Can you make a bag? Can you make a bag?" And because I'm self-taught, it scared me at first. I'm like, "I don't know
Yeah.
how to make a bag." But over time, I told you about like a challenge. So I was like, you know what? I'll try it. So last year, 2024, I decided, I said, you know what? I'm gonna take a swing at sketching out a bag and developing a bag and see what comes up from it. I actually had got the inspiration from of the silhouette from architecture. I'm obsessed with mid-century modern homes, and I came across a home that had a slant in it. And I just, for whatever reason, just my design mind just got to turning, and I was like, what if I just sketched a purse that was shaped like that? And then from there, that's how I started developing it. And I started to show the behind the scenes process to my customers, showing them like, hey, I'm developing a bag and these are the steps and this is where the inspiration came from. And I decided to release it during Women's History Month of 2025. And so that was a whole thing. And I had decided, I was like, I don't want to release it for Women's History Month and not honor my mom by doing it. So I named it after her, and that was a whole thing. So it just kind of just it was just one thing after another, brick after brick, just me figuring out what works and what felt natural. It wasn't forced at all. It was a natural growth that it started to make a lot more sense as time went on.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
with that, obviously there's the initial design in this
Mhm.
scenario, and then
Yeah.
the materials and can it actually be stitched this way and how do we, make it functional and all those things. How many, because I think this is an area that people don't really understand. How many
Mhm.
iterations did you go through before you were like, this is the one?
It took me 9 months. And it was 6 different iterations, 6 different samples that we had to keep going and putting it back in sampling, figuring out the shade of black that I wanted to do, and then if I wanted to do authentic leather or vegan leather, because then you that's different price points. It was
Right.
a lot, but it took me 9 months in total of just sketch to the final, official bag.
And how did you go through the prototyping? Was that overseas? Did you do that, in the US? What was that? Because obviously you go through that iteration.
Mhm.
Then, depending on where you did that, is that also going to be your actual manufacturer and those steps? So, did you do that onshore, offshore? What was the kind of flow there to ultimately get to the final product?
Yeah, so overseas, I have some China manufacturers. I went through I think a total of eight different ones of because some of them were telling me no, they couldn't do it. Some of them told me that they could not do it. The shape was different. So I had some fight there. But when I found a few that did do it, I shopped around with them to see who gave me the best quality and the best pricing. You know how that goes. But I I work with China manufacturers, and so that's my team now. I have 3 different manufacturers in China that I work with.
That's great. And yeah, and I think that's something else that folks don't really realize is like the prototyping is a huge, I mean, 9 months, right? Like from idea to actual product.
Yeah,
And that's, if you're planning on this, that's an investment of time and resources and a lot of things that if you're expecting this to be a fast process,
mhm,
you're probably not ready for that, right? And so I love that anecdote because I think it's so important for people to realize like you've been at this a long time. You've been, putting the time in and driving this business forward, and it's not, for the faint of heart. And so I really appreciate that timeline because I think people don't really realize, from that standpoint. And so you mentioned earlier that you were kind of bringing people along for this ride, showing them behind the scenes and those pieces. Is that all kind of social media driven and how has that impacted your business, your connection with the consumer? So often we're trying to kind of hide until we're ready, and versus transparency first. And
yeah,
I'm curious how that's kind of driven this business as well, because there is a whole segment today of the closer we are to the customer, the more connected they feel to the brand, et cetera, et cetera. And there are so many points that people should get excited about this. It's your
mhm,
mother's name, the business is you and your father. I mean, it's an awesome story. So how much has that played into kind of the growth of your business and being transparent and putting
Mhm.
yourself out there as a new designer
Yeah.
and hoping, that we come to a actual product that people want,
Mhm.
how has that, been for you and how much has that impacted the business?
Yes. It's helped me learn a lot because I tell you, I lean on my customers a lot for their feedback on colors and sizes and all those things. So I I've always been transparent with them that I'm self-taught and I don't know everything. And I think me being that way has helped them understand that they can give me a little grace sometimes. If I don't get things right, they give me grace. They were like, okay, Dante didn't do this right, but I know that he's gonna make sure he fixes this. Um, and I also think that it makes them feel like they're a part of the journey. And people love to feel a part of the journey. They love to root for people. They love to root for the underdog. So if they're seeing you start from the bottom, starting from my bedroom, and now here I am with a warehouse now, the people have seen that and they're more inclined to purchase. They're more inclined to tell others about it because they feel like they have a stake in the company in a way because they feel like they've seen the growth from day one. So transparency has helped me build this amazing community, and it's also helped me feel like I'm not doing this alone because I don't have a in-house team yet, just yet. But my customers make me feel like I'm not doing this alone. I have them with me.
That's awesome, and that connection's invaluable, right? I think
Uh-huh.
it's phenomenal to have that type of support and the lessons. You can iterate so much faster if you're actually getting real feedback versus investing 9 months in hoping, right? You're like, I at least have some semblance of we're in the right ballpark.
Mhm.
So let's come back to that timeline. You just mentioned barracks to warehouse now. So we leave the military. Are you doing this in the basement? What was the path and what was the ultimate decision that it's time to scale this and have a warehouse and take those next steps? Like what was that path for you in terms of this overall journey?
Yeah, so in 2022 is when I got out, and so when I got home, I moved from California back to Ohio, and I got me an apartment, and I didn't want to stop the business. I've had different times where I've slowed down, but I never stopped. And that season of me transitioning to a civilian life and being a veteran, that was rough for me because it's a lot of different moving pieces. So I slowed down a little bit, but I didn't stop. I just kept promoting the business when I could, and I started packaging orders and whatnot through in my apartment. And I continued to do that until it got to a point where this year when I released the purse. So from 2022 to 2025, I was in my apartment pushing inventory out of my apartment. And then this year when I released my first purse, it was the biggest drop I've ever had. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to continue to do this out of my apartment. It was too many boxes everywhere. My apartment was a mess. And I said, I'm just going to have to take this leap and get my first space. And that's when I reached out to Rise and got a tour. And I was like, this is perfect. It was so many, it just made too much sense. I was like, I just have to do this. And then they're willing to grow with me. So I was like, this makes sense because I don't know how fast this is gonna go. So many question marks. So I was like, with them growing with me, if I do have a big drop and it's like, oh wait, I need a bigger space, all I have to do is reach out to our property manager and he's able to put me in a bigger space. So it just made a lot of sense.
Yep. I have this vision of, I don't know if you've seen these pictures of the Spanx founder when she was running out of her house and she's like
Mm,
going down the stairs with like 30 boxes and there's a pallet on her driveway. And
yes.
you just get to that point that you're like, I just can't do it here anymore. And it's time to take that leap. But that
Yes.
leap is also an investment. And I'm sure an investment alongside the product that you're ordering and the timing of payments and all of these pieces, you
Mhm.
know, how stressful was that for you and how much thought and time did it take to say, okay, it really is? Because I'm sure in the back of your mind for a while, you're like, I'd love my kitchen table back, but when did that leap ultimately happen, and how did you convince yourself that now was the time?
It was a gut feeling. It was truly a gut feeling. And also I was tired of going up and down all these stairs. Up and down all these stairs with all these different boxes. It just made it a lot harder on me, to get orders out to my customers. I wanted the experience for my customers. I'm very customer focused. And
Mm,
so I wanted my customer experience to be better. And I was like, if I move into a space that's dedicated to the business alone, everything will be more organized. I'll be able to get orders out faster. And I think people started to take me even more serious when they see that I had a space. So it was a lot of pluses for me. So
yeah.
I was like, it's just aligned with my gut feeling telling me to do this. I was like, I'm just going to go ahead and make this leap. I have to invest in my business. This money that I have coming in, it has to go back into the business anyway. So might as well put it in places that's going to generate me more revenue.
Yep. That's awesome. And
Yes.
so now we're at this stage. We have a big release coming up,
Mhm.
and you're taking pre-orders now for the bags. How much of that is kind of pre-planned, and how much of this is we're going to see how this first run goes and then order more? Like, where are you now in that kind of life cycle of, you start to hit these confidence points of projections and things like that? And obviously, I think another factor that I'll put a pin in and come back to is lead time, especially working with Chinese manufacturers. So how much of that is like betting on yourself, and how much of that is kind of being able to see, how pre-orders go, and getting ready for obviously the holiday season coming up? How is that flowing for you today at this stage of your business?
So pre-orders, like it's data. And so I always, when I do pre-orders, I base it off of the customer. If I hit a certain amount of orders, I always order over when I
Sure.
do put production in. So but it also helps me when it comes to just how much overhead that I have, is because I don't want to invest all of this money in inventory because I kept selling out this year. Every
Mhm.
time I would drop, I kept selling out and I felt bad. I'm like, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm trying my hardest to
Right.
keep up with this production, but I also don't want to overdo it and then be stuck with inventory. So, but every time I would up the amount uh, of bags I would have on hand, I would sell out. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do a pre order. I haven't done a pre order since March. I'm going to do a pre-order drop to end off 2025, and we're going to see how it goes. And then on top of that, I'm going to put more bags in production so that those that don't get a pre-order slot, they'll also have the opportunity once all bags are on hand.
Yep, that's great. And that, I'm sure each time you're kind of like incrementally increasing that. And but I think, one of the things that I don't think a lot of people realize is you're going to pay for those bags before those dollars are coming in. And so you're essentially recycling your revenue constantly.
Yes.
And this kind of plays back into that logistics and manufacturing piece of, once you say go with your manufacturer, what's the timeline to those actually coming to you at the warehouse and being ready to then ship out?
Yeah. 10 to 12 weeks.
Yeah.
10 to 12 weeks. So it takes some time. I always tell my customers, look, you have to be patient because we don't rush production. This manufacturer team that I have, they're very intentional about every little detail, and which I love. That's why we work well together. So it takes 10 to 12 weeks to get production from the time that the first thing is done all the way to the end. It's 10 to 12 weeks. So it takes time.
And is that, one thing that I don't think a lot of people realize is that might be by air, that might be by sea. And
Yes.
depending on what happens in a port or whatever, you
Mhm.
may not have the exact timeline. So how are those coming to you, and what's that been like in terms of kind of seeing this whole process unfold?
Yeah, so when I do pre-orders, I always do by air just to make it quicker. Obviously, it's more money that I have to pay, but like I said, I'm very customer focused. So I'm like, I just got to take care of my customers. They already done waited 10 to 12 weeks. The least I can do is take, this extra money, spend this extra money to get them their bags quicker. So I always do by air, which is 7 to 14 days.
Yeah.
Better than 30 days. So
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, and that's always an interesting one. And
mhm.
so as you kind of think about the future, you know, do you have a feeling of when you kind of shift from pre-order to stock? And what's that kind of, North Star for you? Because obviously I can only assume that's the dream and the goal.
Yes.
But what does that look like, and how are you kind of thinking about planning and preparing for the next phase of BRYLAMAR?
Yeah, so 2026, I'm planning on having on stock or on hand inventory. So I'm gonna rotate. I'm gonna rotate from pre-order, and then the next drop will be on stock. So I want to just do a rotation of it. And I think that 2027, the way that things are going, 2027 will be the year that I have only on hand drops. That's the plan.
That's awesome. And so when you think about that, I mean, you're selling out so quickly, and
Mhm.
that can both be a wonderful feeling and a terrifying feeling, I'm sure. And then you start to evaluate, is it the price point? Should I be raising that? Will that change things? So, how much time are you spending on some of these logistics that are the ugly, not fun stuff? And how much time are you spending on, the customer facing, the design, and as you kind of grown this, I'm sure that balance ebbs and flows, but
Yes.
how do you kind of manage that for yourself today?
Mhm. So I have days. I have like my Tuesdays and my Thursdays are business. I always say that's like my business. And so I'll do the logistics and operations and all of the back end things that are necessary to keep the thing going. But on the other days, because I'm a creative first, so on all the other days, except for Sundays, I always give myself Sunday to relax and unwind. But all the other days, I'm doing creative, cut content and design and creative direction, just to give myself a balance until I can have a team in house. That's the ultimate goal, to have a team in house, so I don't have to do all of these different roles. But right now, that's how I'm balancing it, just having dedicated days for each thing.
And when you're going through this, obviously we haven't even talked about the front end web page and the ordering process and
Mhm.
things like that. I'm assuming all of this is self-taught. How much of this were you kind of preparing for while you were still in the service, and how much of this is kind of just an iteration as success comes, you learn and pivot, as challenges come, you learn and pivot. How much of that are you kind of like carried through, and how much of it is a daily journey?
All of it is a daily journey. All of it is a daily journey, if I'm being honest. But I am very coachable, so I'm always asking questions. I'm always, like, doing as much research as I can to just get ahead of things. I always feel like I'm getting ahead, and then there's always something else that comes out of the blue, and I'm like, "Okay, so I have to learn this too." But so it's every day I feel like I'm learning something new, but I feel like that's what's fun about what I do, is that I
Yeah.
get to grow at my own pace in a way. Like, I'm moving at my pace. I'm not really moving at the pace of others. I'm moving at what works for me at this time.
And that's awesome. And you've been able to do a successful business. And I think that's such a testament of kind of trusting the process. And I think a lot of people will get over their skis,
Yeah.
invest too much early, and then they don't have the ability to continue to grow. And so
Mhm,
I love that you've kind of taken that, steady is the path. And
mhm,
so I'm curious, in that learning, obviously we have YouTube, we've got ChatGPT, we have all these paths to learn from. The thing that has always been interesting for me on both, really any kind of e-commerce and or wholesale business is that it's so fragmented, and there's not a central place for folks to come together and, learn from each other. Have you found any paths of mentors or folks in the industry that you can lean on, or is it really just I'm learning by myself day in day out and kind of trying to go from there?
So I always say that I have a lot of mentors, but I don't know that any of them. I watch a lot of podcasts. I watch a lot of podcasts. I read a lot of books. A lot of people that I just look up to, and most of them, I want to say like 98% of them aren't in my industry.
Yeah,
So um, I'm have mentors, but I don't know them. So I don't have a group in person yet, but that is the plan, to just continue to start being around people that are in my industry, so that we can learn from one another. But
yeah.
right now, no, I don't. I don't have anybody in person yet.
Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest challenges, I think, in your space, is that, you'd love to find somebody that had already tested some of these manufacturers. You'd love to find somebody that knows the best, processing company for your credit card transactions, and on and on and on, right? I mean, it's an endless list of those challenges. And so I give a lot of credit to folks in this space because it truly is self-taught. You're
Mhm.
learning from your own mistakes, and I also really admire that you're taking lessons and pieces from other industries. And I think that can be a limiting factor for folks that don't, because
Mhm.
there's always a good idea that
Always.
if you just turn it slightly on its head, it works for me now, and if you're not bringing your head up out of your own industry
Mhm.
and having those conversations, you're only learning from your own mistakes, and that's a limiting factor in terms of maximizing growth. And so I love that you're always exploring those paths and still finding the time to tweak and manage your own business, because I think that's an area that I think a lot of people struggle with.
Yes.
Well, I'm very impressed. I mean, I think the two themes that I love about this that I've pulled out of our conversation: follow your gut. I mean, you've said it. I don't know if you know that you've said it a couple times, but it was at every juncture. It was, my gut was telling me to go this path, and you had the strength and commitment to actually jump in and do it. And it sounds like, is that kind of a over under theme of your entire journey, is just trust your gut?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I got to trust my gut. I guess got because I mean, what else? If I'm reading books and I'm watching podcasts and I'm asking questions, I mean, the last thing I have to lean on is myself and my gut. Nobody is in they're not in my mind of what I see from my business. So sometimes I all I have to lean on is myself. So
Yeah.
my
That's
gut.
awesome. And then
Yes.
the last one is just, I think, discipline. I mean, I think, in every entrepreneur, there's hard times, there's good times, there's doubts, there's everything. But, with that gut decision to do it, you're
Mhm.
then following through with that commitment and that, kind of accountability for yourself. How how do you do that daily? Is there a trick? Is there something that you kind of, tell yourself? Because I think
Mhm.
that is where people, you know, just check out, and unintentionally, right? It's
Mhm.
just, it's too much today.
Yeah.
But those things are the things that keep the business growing. So how do you kind of help guide yourself down that path? Every day that you're waking up and saying, "We're getting it done."
Yeah. I plan out my months as best as I can, some because things are changing every day. So I plan out my months and then I plan out my weeks and then I plan out my days. And then I try my hardest to just do everything that's on that to-do list. And then another thing, I speak to myself out loud a lot. Some some people might think that might be a little crazy, but I speak out loud to myself a lot because for whatever reason, it just helps me calm down. It helps me calm my anxiety. And then sometimes you'll say things out loud and it'll help you like decide if that's a good decision to make or not. If
Yep.
you're once you hear yourself say something out loud, your gut to tell you that might not be the way to go.
Yep.
So I speak out loud a lot, and then I lean on my support system. My parent, my mom, and my grandparents and my friends as much as I can. They don't know anything about my industry besides what I've told them, but just being able to vent to them when I'm having rough days, because I have rough days. So I call them and I vent, and I just be honest, and then I think that helps me have clarity as well. Just being able to get off, the different things that are going on in my mind.
That's wonderful. So we did an episode recently on just the amount of emotional and mental toll that running a business can have. And if you're not venting, if you're not, having those conversations and finding your support system, it can be a wildly lonely experience, which only drives even more doubt, right? And so I appreciate you saying that, because I think it's so critical that they may not be your business partner. They may not be have any clue what you're actually doing,
Right.
but they're there for you, and you found them and you reach out. So I love that. Also, shout out if you hear Dante in his warehouse talking to himself, he's totally fine. We're in progress.
I'm fine. Yes.
Love it. I love it. But no, that's wonderful, because I think so many people don't, and it is a huge barrier to growth, because you're carrying this weight around that you just don't need, and it's only going to limit you. And so you found these access points, and I appreciate you sharing that with the audience, because it is challenging, it is lonely, and once you get it off your chest, it's in the rear view, and now you can move forward. So thank you for that. So I'd love to wrap up. The thing we usually try and wrap up with is, what is a lesson that you would give to folks, about kind of starting a business, things that you've run into, and you can do it, whatever comes to mind, because it's always enlightening when we hear it from somebody that's in the thick of it. But what is some advice that you'd give to other entrepreneurs, vets, whomever, that are trying to get started and get going?
I would say, because I hear this a lot from just different entrepreneurs, is support people worrying too much about the people that are in their lives currently that aren't really supporting or don't really see their vision or their dream. I would say don't worry about that. I would say worry about the people that do support, because there's a lot of support that gets overlooked, like a like, a share, people even giving you advice on how you can maneuver in your business. I think that it's important to focus on that support, but also focus on your target audience, because it's going to be the target audience that takes you to the next level, not your friends and family all the time. So I would say focus on the people that matter and not those that don't.
That's great. And I assume some of that, I mean, you're reaching out directly to these folks that are sharing comments and liking and actually having a conversation, which
Mhm,
I think is also a fear and doubt for some folks of like, well, what are they going to say? What am I going to ask them? What's going to happen?
mhm,
And I love that because, like, when you're building a business on the internet and especially inviting the world in via social, you're
mhm,
going to get all of the crap. There's going to be a lot of crap, and those folks don't matter, to your point. It's the
mhm,
folks that are engaging and you're reaching out and actually having a real conversation that not only I'm sure gives you some spark from time to time, but
mhm,
also some lessons, right? And that's incredible, and I appreciate you kind of saying that because it's so true. Get rid of the doubters, lean into those that are there, and get out of your circle, right? Because you mentioned like there's a time to lean on the family, there's a time to lean on your friends, but don't leave yourself in an echo chamber that doesn't allow you to grow, whether that be professionally or personally, because it's going to open so many more doors. And I love that sentiment as well.
yes.
Awesome. Well, Donte, thank you so much for the time and sharing your journey with us. From barracks to business, I love it. It's an incredible story, and you've done a wonderful job of sharing some of those key insights that I think so many people are looking for that we hope can build their next business. So, thank you so much for the time, and we can't wait to see where you go.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate you guys for having me.